Hi everyone, my name is John Ennis, curator producer at Journeys in Design. Welcome to our virtual design hub, aka my living room, and to our Chasing Rainbows program. It's Thursday, so we have a chance to engage with another rainbow maker. And essentially that's a look at Scottish creative practice, and particularly those elements underlying much of creative industry here. So Sundays has been our Rainbows On show. Thank you so much to everyone who sent in images of their rainbows around about their homes when they've been out and about, and also wonderful images, rainbow images have been crafted. We'll show those again this Sunday at 1. Fridays has been about exploring colour and culture out of Scotland in other countries. We've been to India, we've been to Ghana, we've been to Ireland, and we're going to the Americas tomorrow, and look forward to speaking to you then. Thursdays at 3, that means it's Rainbow Makers, and I thank you very much to Alison Harley, to Andy McGregor, and to Richard Ingleby, who've joined us in preceding Thursdays. We've looked at writing about colour, exhibiting colour, curating with colour. And today I am delighted to be talking about conserving colour with Helen Creasy of the Scottish Conservation Studio. Helen, hello.
Hello.
How are we doing?
Good, thank you.
Good. Well, look, I'm in semi-lockdown in South Central Edinburgh, and your normal place of work is in South Queensferry. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that location?
Okay, so where I work is a very lovely place. It's the Carriage House at Hopetoun House, which is 10 miles to the west of Edinburgh, just outside South Queensferry on the shores of the Firth of Forth.
So just this side of the Forth River Bridge, the Edinburgh side of the Forth River Bridge, really.
And yeah, so the Carriage House is a lovely, spacious suite of rooms that we have had our business in for the last 15 years. And I share the business with two partners. One is Tula is a textile conservator, and Will is an artefacts conservator, and I'm a paper conservator. So between the three of us, we cover a big spectrum of cultural material that needs.
And I guess those are the core disciplines of conservation, the core groupings of conservation that you're representing really very completely there. Now, I've been lucky to meet you over the years. First of all, as a collector, with a couple of issues around works on paper that we've talked about, and it's been a joy in this last little while to re-engage as a curator with Journeys in Design, and in particular to work with Ben Hanjek, who's our archivist. And so with Tula, to bring down a wonderful tablecloth to witness the work of Vanessa Habib for the Highland Folk Museum, who's looking at conservation of a wonderful linen tablecloth from the Highlands. And then for the lovely visit that you and Will made to our exhibition when we were at Dovecote in Edinburgh, to think about conserving and transporting. And we learnt so much. So a big, big thank you from Ben and I for your help with that. Yes, and when we spoke on the phone yesterday, you were arranging a group visit from the University of St Andrews. You were thinking about the next graduate that you might bring into the fold for their own training and your apprenticeship kind of that you're offering. So you really got a lot of reach across the country in those cultural items that you're the items of life really in Scotland that you're working with. So it was certainly every time I've been visiting, it's been a privilege, because I have spotted bits of the country all over the place in different parts of the studio. In fact, you do work for many of the national organisations. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the national?
We do. Yes, I mean, we work for a really broad range of clients. So we work for private individuals. So somebody can have just one little thing that they've inherited or they've bought at an auction or whatever, right through independent museums, local authority museums, and we work for the nationals as well. So we work for National Galleries, National Museums, Historic Environment Scotland, National Trust for Scotland. So we're lucky that we're we're well established, and because we have the 3 disciplines and we have space to work in, it's, yeah, a lot of people bring us interesting stuff.
Fantastic. And the space that you've actually got there, it is a wee bit like me getting very nervous and slightly awestruck when I visit a maker in their studio. I feel slightly the same when I've come to visit you guys at South Queensferry. It's really a remarkable little furnace of activity. Well, no fire, obviously. Not be helpful, but no, it feels like a real industrious hum of activity when you're there. It's a beautiful space. Would you like to tell a little about the space?
Yeah, it's a busy space, but it's quite calm as well, I guess. What we do is, it's quiet mostly. We have good music on, and we're busy, we're hard at it, but when we're doing that, we're concentrating and we're careful, and it's sort of it has a very nice energy to it.
There's that.
We have two big spaces. One is predominantly for wet treatments. With works on paper, I do a lot of washing, which sometimes surprises people that you can wash paper, but absolutely, that's sort of a key tool for me. Will, the artefacts conservator, has a separate couple of rooms because his work is sort of more messy, so we don't want his mess interfering with the textile, which is much more sort of clean. We have to keep it,
Sure.
Not quite clinically clean, but we're very careful to keep things clean. You want clean blotters, you want clean wash trays, that sort of thing. So yeah, you're never causing any sort of damage or harm to an object as you treat it.
Well, I remember last summer coming out, and there's a big table and spreading out that huge Highland linen tablecloth, and simultaneously working with you. Tula was working with Vanessa, and we were working, and you were in a smaller table weighing down maps that I was chatting to you about, and taking photographs from above them. It was wonderful to see it. It was great, yeah. Great space. And so the work with the Nationals, that will be out and about as well as in the studio.
Yes.
Have you been working on any particular projects that have taken you out of the studio?
Yeah, so a project that I'm actually working on at the moment, which is that sort of spreading over quite a period of time, just due to the nature of it, is I'm working on something for National Trust for Scotland. And it's a series of ordnance survey maps from Canna House on the Isle of Canna. So National Trust for Scotland owns the Isle of Canna.
They actually own that island, don't they?
They own the whole island, yes. So obviously up on the northwest coast, near Rum and Muck. And there's the Canna House, the big house on the island. It's a very small population. I think around 20 people live on Canna. And there's one big house which has, quite a historic collection in it. And what they wanted me to deal with, so last summer I went up with an assistant, and we went into the billiard room, and we had to take down.
Yes, the billiard room. We've all got a billiard room. Yeah.
There are 33 OS maps drawing pinned to the end wall of the billiard room. So a wood panelled room with loads of light coming in, and just drawing pinned roughly onto the wall. So over the years, 50 years or so, lots of light has come in and degraded the paper, made it go really browny orange colour. Lots of soot, cobwebs, dead insects, you name it.
Wow, a conservator's dream.
Well, sort of, yes. And because the paper's so degraded, it's really brittle. And so some of it was torn, like, if somebody's brushed up against the ones that were lower down, they've got ripped, and the ones up at the top have had more sort of leaks coming in through the roof. So a very careful job up step ladders to take the drawing pins out. You have to keep the drawing pins and reuse them.
Wow, so it's very careful.
Yeah. And document them all. So a photograph of each one before it comes off the wall, take it down, brush off most of the sort of major debris, and then very carefully roll it up and bring it back to the studio. So then I did a test treatment on one of them, and discussed with the conservators and curators at the National Trust of Scotland, and they agreed, yes, we could treat the whole lot. So Canna House is undergoing some restoration, and
very exciting.
When it's safe again, then the conserved maps will be put back up. But every day at the moment, what I'm doing is washing one map, and then when I've got 4 washed, then I line them. So I'm lining them onto Japanese paper with wheat starch paste, and that gives them a really good strength. So the washing takes out a lot of the embrittlement, takes out quite a lot of the discoloration, not all of it, and then lining it gives it strength and flexibility, and then we'll pin them back up. So it'll look not how it was originally, because there's a lot of discoloration that's still there, but it will be in spirit, it will be how they were originally.
I mean, that's very exciting. I don't know the history of Canada, but I do obviously appreciate that this will have been a house, an activity. They'll have the map room, they sort of make it mend or slap it up on the wall, map room, we're going to go here, we'll be there, and all the rest. So I can imagine the joy of planning a trips from the house. And that would be a lovely...
There's a lovely, I must just tell you this, John, you'll like this, because it's a billiard room, there are marks of blue chalk from the billiard cues that have been accidentally put on
against the wall.
So, and of course they're all at a sort of certain level, not high up ones, not the really low ones. So they just, and so part of the treatment was we're not going to lose the blue chalk because it's part of the life.
Part of that story. That's fantastic, fantastic. And also I'm bound to mention, obviously I'm a linen obsessive, and how often linen was used as the backing for maps in past. And that process you've talked about, you'll get a map, we've talked before, you'll get a map in, and it's degrading, it's ripped, it's torn, whatever. And there's this process of removing the old linen and using, as you've said, the contemporary carrier, which would be the Japanese paper. Fascinating. And in fact, I pinched a bit of linen, which we probably thought was about 300 years old. Off an old chart. And I was obsessing on how sustainable a textile it is. It had done the job in paper.
And obviously we wouldn't normally take the linen backing off if it's still doing a good job.
Exactly.
It depends on the project. Oftentimes we can just keep it. But it depends whether you're needing to do more a more involved treatment.
It was one of those serendipitous days when I was there, and you happened to be needing that bit of linen, so it was lovely. So listen, this segues very neatly into a conversation I'd like to have about your own, or at least we can set our thoughts on colour in relation to your own pretty intense 2 years of training in relation to conservation. And you've mentioned discoloration, tears, stains. We talked about foxing in work that I've had. But essentially the first year is not about colour. It's the November year.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a bit about?
So it's a 2-year training. It's now an MA. It wasn't when I did it a long time ago. I did it after getting a degree in art history, not knowing where I was going with that, but coming across this wonderfully practical profession that I really was just utterly inspired to go towards. So you start the course, and in the first year you treat black and white prints, so engravings and etchings primarily. Right. So things that don't have colour on them, because colour for paper conservatives is definitely the sort of the more tricky element. If somebody brings in a black and white print, you just, that's,
we can manage that.
That's quite easy. It's quite straightforward for us to treat. And colour is much more complicated. So in the first year of the course, you're treating black and white prints, and you're learning about the paper and how it responds to treatment and what you can do. So how you can reduce discoloration, foxing, take dirt off, repairing tears, putting infills in.
Foxing is a lovely word. Do you want to tell us a little bit what that means?
Yeah, foxing is a sort of rusty brown spotted discoloration that you often find on paper if it's been in a damp condition. It's a sort of slightly mysterious thing, because sometimes you might even have a book that has some pages that are foxed and some that aren't.
Okay.
And so obviously all those book pages have been in the same environment.
Is it something within?
So it can, yes, it's
within the paper.
Yeah, it's a combination of possibly particles within the paper when it's made, maybe tiny metal particles, so it's a related thing, but it's also a mold related thing, because it tends to appear in acidic and damp environments. Yeah, so and oftentimes if we can wash the paper, we might well be able to get rid of it or reduce it quite a lot. Yeah. So
and that sort of brings in the forensics almost of conservation, and that overlap with telling stories.
It is a sort of detective-y sort of thing. You know, something comes in and every new thing, you're looking at it so carefully, just trying to understand why it looks the way it does, and what you should be doing with it, as well as what you could be doing with it.
Okay, so there we go. You've had a whole year on what I think you call the support, which is the paper. In this case that we're talking about, and thinking about it as something that needs attention in itself. And then the year of color.
Yes.
It's your second year, and you talked a bit about that and the pretty intense complexity of what that then becomes in your training and obviously in your practice. What fascinated a little bit, and I've made this mistake more than once, confusing dye and pigment as a basic schoolboy error when it comes to understanding color. You tell us a wee bit about the nature of pigment and paper.
Yeah, so people often say to us that they're surprised that we can wash a watercolor, and indeed you have to be very, very careful as you do it.
I'm just thinking amateurs like me across the country
like,
thinking,
oh, great.
Kitchen sink, let's give it a go.
No. So if you think about if you paint a watercolor, you have a watercolor pan, like a hard pan, and you take a wet brush and you work up the color into a suspension. So it's many particles of pigment with probably some gum arabic around it to be a binder. You work it up into suspension, and you take your brush and you brush it over the paper, and the particles are spread over the paper in the water, and the water soaks into the paper, and the particles settle onto the absorbent paper. So if the paper is doesn't have much sizing to it, that it will be sort of quite rough and absorbent, like blotting paper, and the watercolor particles will settle well right into the paper. But if you then take a very intensely loaded brush and you make a very strong mark on the paper, and you maybe do that several times to really build up the intensity of the color, it will sit proud on the paper. And marks like that for us are more problematic in a wet treatment, because if you then get the paper wet, they literally, they have less grip, so to speak, on the paper.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So
they could wash off. So if I get a watercolor in that's quite old and it has a lot of washes on it, usually, I mean, obviously I have to test all the colors anyway, but usually I'm thinking that's, I'm probably going to make good progress with this one.
Oh, yeah.
If it's a very smooth, hard paper and there's a lot of sort of highlighted intense color, it's going to be much more difficult to treat. Yeah. I mean, not impossible, but there are ways and ways, but
So, I mean, that's fascinating in itself. And then it comes to the actual management of conserving things. And I was very interested in just some of the techniques that you apply. But to give it a spin on color, and we're chasing rainbows here, we could think about the story you told me about the blue becoming blue apparently from nowhere.
Yeah. So it's something we come across quite often, is that you'll have a watercolor where the paper has become quite discolored. It's been in the light, it's been in a frame with a poor quality backing, and the paper is degraded and become discolored, and it's like a yellowy color, sometimes almost, you know, digestive biscuit sort of color. So if the paper has gone that browny yellow, you won't see the blue in the sky in particular, because it tends to be more lightly washed, I suppose, and you tend not to notice the blue. So once we've done some treatment, washed the paper, sometimes that's floating it on a water bath, an alkaline water bath, discoloration is solubilized and taken out into the bath. The paper then dries and the paper looks brighter and fresher, and all of a sudden it's, oh, the sky's blue and there are clouds. It's
fantastic.
That you really didn't notice before. It was always there, and we haven't changed the pigment in any way, but because we've changed the support, the color of the support, it's visible, and it's lovely. It's quite subtle, but it makes such a difference.
Oh, it must do. And I'm sure clients must just be, it must have one of those miracle moments. Oh my goodness, I got a painting of color that I didn't really.
Yeah, it is a lovely moment. It's a privilege for us, really, when people, you know, don't know what we can do and they bring it in. I don't suppose you can do anything but. I say, yeah. And then they come to collect it. Yeah. It's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic. It's yeah. You also mentioned an interesting one. We were talking about how sometimes you want to conserve very small bits, or you want to, I think we were talking about treating the whole support and cleaning the whole paper, but actually having to be particular attention to one thing. We thought about the signature that you told me that was in.
Yes. So we recently had a set of quite large black wash drawings, paintings, quite dramatic. They were in a black watercolor, sort of done with a very big brush, and some of it quite heavily loaded, but sunk well into the paper. And then there was a little red monogram in the bottom corner of each one. It was a set of 10 or so pictures.
And was that the signature of the artist or whatever?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, hand done in red, and they'd been stored in a shed. They're very foxed and discolored, and I looked at them, and initially it was like, oh yeah, I might be able to do something. And then I saw the red signature in the bottom right hand corner. It wasn't a signature, it was just two initials, so it was very small.
But so that's very interesting. Even though you got this fairly expansive bit of work, you were able to home in and think, oh, there's the problem bit.
Immediately, that's the problem. Yeah.
Challenging bit anyway.
So what we did, tested the black. That's all safe for wet treatment, and the red, yes, it bleeds, and that's, you know, after many years of experience and good training, you know, obviously my eye goes straight to the things that could be
challenging. Yep.
Yeah. So the red was soluble in water, so you know, you might say, okay, so then we can't treat this thing, but we can. So we used a wax. It's called cyclododecane, and you can deliver it very specifically right onto this two initials, the monogram, and that sort of locks up the red pigment, so then we can get the thing wet, and we can wash it, and the wax protects the red and it doesn't get wet.
Wow. Right.
So we did all the wet treatment. The discoloration was reduced. In fact, with this one, we couldn't really, for other reasons, we couldn't take it as far as we wanted, but it did look better. And then the beauty of this wax, the cyclododecane, is that you leave it in the air and it sublimes. so it just like evaporates. It takes a week.
Wow.
Yeah, so you don't need to do then a further treatment to flush it out, which would be dangerous because the red is quite soluble. So you don't want to add anything else, you like a solvent or something to pull it through. So you just leave it and it disappears.
Fantastic, fantastic. I'm loving the word sublimes as a verb, to sublime. And there's a couple of other words I loved. We talked about a word for red, vermilion, which I always associate with an previous anatomical, the vermilion line of the red lips where it meets the rest of the skin. So I love the use of that word that you used. And you had a word for yellow, which I hadn't heard before.
Yes, you were asking me which colours were particularly vulnerable, sort of soluble. And there's a yellow called gamboge.
Gamboge.
Gamboge. You find it in Victorian watercolours quite a lot. It's used for highlights. So maybe like a woman's dress or a coach or something would be painted yellow. And again, as soon as you see a picture with, I recognise it. It's like, woohoo, that's going to be really soluble. And sometimes to the point where you think, I don't think we should treat this. I mean, we could, but we would lose some of that yellow and we really shouldn't do that.
No.
On the hats as well, it's sometimes used as like a tracing around a border of a county or something. And if you lost it, you're losing part of the original application that that the maker put onto it, and it's sacrosanct. You just don't do that.
Okay, so this is very interesting. You use the term really we shouldn't. So there's an ethics of conservation, and I mean I think that's really fascinating. And we did share a story, and perhaps we can finish with this one. The ethics around decisions you had to make, actually in a no color context with graphite.
Yes, somebody brought me a pencil drawing by Turner, and in fact they thought it was in ink, and they said they thought it was very, very faded. They had bought it 20 years ago and it looked different, like the image was much more visible, and they'd looked after it well, but it seemed to be faded, and they said, could I draw over the top of it to make it? I was like, no. So we can't do that. We can't add anything to the design, to the what the creator has created. What we're doing is conserving it. In fact, that was a happy story in that, because it wasn't ink and it wasn't faded, it was actually quite a lightly drawn graphite picture. And what had happened was that the paper, it's a bit like the blue, the paper had discolored to the point where it was quite brown. And so the graphite pencil lines were sort of lost in this darker support. Okay. And once I'd washed it and used some bleaching with a lamp, the graphite lines, were much more visible. And yes, so that that was it. It was quite a straightforward treatment, but you needed to understand what was going on with it.
Sure, yeah. I mean, let rip with a felt tip pen might have been the moved by the client, but fantastic. I mean, that's so interesting. Conserving creativity and respecting the ethical decisions around that. Helen, we're almost time up. Thank you so much for chatting today. It's been really fascinating. I keep saying every day is a school day, but never more so than when I get to chat with you. And I look forward to a trip to Hopetoun. I'll bring the cakes from a wonderful the Manna House Bakery in South Queensferry. I'm recommending. I'll bring those.
Very welcome.
And, we'll chat hopefully in situ another time.
Great. Thanks, John.
Much.
Okay.
Bye for now. Bye.